All right, let's get this up and running. Welcome back. Good morning, Walter, Bianca, John, Josh. Good to see you guys this morning. This trade has me feeling a little bit 50-50 because we did have some candlestick closures below some key zones. And so I would recommend lower risk on today's trade. What we're looking for, if I can fucking collapse this side. Hold on. Okay, here we go. So we got a pretty clear area of support here. This is kind of our phase one where the market consolidated. We did have a break outside of the range, but this is kind of like one of those really, really technical issues where 5 minute, it's still technically part of the range because the neckline was here. But on the higher time frames, this thing kind of looks like it broke out of that phase one, and which means that the first direction is down, then up, which means kind of like sellers have the advantage because the direction of the first move was to the downside. Now, if we know anything about the strategy, it's buy low, sell high. And so we're looking at this area of support. We had a clear violation. We did hit the stop loss, which is a very big point because the stop loss is set for a reason. That is kind of our final line of defense. Now, because price managed to close back above, in the class and even on these streams, I always talk about there's a four-step model you're looking for to confirm if price is genuinely breaking back in a range or if this is a fake out, which is very common because they look very similar to the untrained eye. But essentially, when you're looking at a market, either like you're trying to gauge whether this thing is retesting back inside of this support to go up, or if it's retesting back inside the range, faking a bunch of buying pressure, and then going to crash. Really, first is a break back above support. So we've already had that. Then there needs to be a closure above support. We've had that. Now we need to see a retest. Now the retest can go through that zone, and ideally it does, because you really want like sellers. I guess if I can put this in a story form, you want sellers to at least attempt to try to take the market down, and then you want to see that buyers are holding the zone. So like a physical demonstration of that would be the market retesting through this support and then wicking, and the closure of the candle is above support. So closure is kind of is like the final stamp to show whether the market is respecting the previous areas that it was bidding and selling at, or if the market is now creating new lows. And so this next 1 hour candle is going to be crucial. We can even go down to the 30 minute, for example. I would love to see a correction back inside the range, and then we close back above. So to go back through the checklist, we had a closure back above the range, or sorry, first a break, then the closure, and then the retest. You want to see a deep retest that wicks, but the closure has to be above the range as well. And then if you're lucky, if you're looking at this on the 15 or 30, ideally you want to see it establish support, which means multiple touches at that new higher low. Why? Because if you don't have all these conditions, let's say you have 3 out of 5, then what the market can do is you've already had a few of these conditions play out. You've had the bullish closure above the support, and you've had what looks to be a retest above the zone. Now, if the market does not respect the support and instead starts to create new lows, then that's not going to confirm our strategy even more. That's not going to be that fifth added confirmation. Instead, it's going to be a symbol that sellers are kind of gaining control and they might take the market lower. So you need, and this is the thing about any multi-step system or any system that actually has real confirmations, is that it's not just about one independent confirmation in an isolated place. It's about all of those confirmations lining up into one high probability trade. Okay, so we've already had a few of the conditions. Now it's kind of gone from like it might to it probably will. But we still need one or two in order to have that sort of 90% plus probability trade that we really like to look for. So for now, it's a risk I'm taking, but we do not have the confirmation yet. Again, I want to see break in and a closure back above the support. That's going to happen on the 15, 30 minute, and we're going to be here to catch it. So welcome back, everybody. We have some very interesting things. So a lot of Fed speakers this morning. If you guys are not subscribed to our morning report, make sure to subscribe. But also, did I audit Trump's big, beautiful bill, and did I expose it completely for not only failing to reduce the deficit, which is kind of the whole fucking point of why we voted Trump in, lots of debt. We're going to be paying for it for a while. Doge, you guys remember that? Elon Musk? Yeah, none of that came true. So instead, we got basically an increase in the federal deficit. This budget recommendation is bigger than the one that came before. And here's what I did. So I put the categories of spending that are going to get impacted. So the Department of Defense got an extra 150 billion, maybe about 250 billion. And so all the budget cuts they've made in small ancillary departments, completely useless. What I've also done in this is gone through the expectations, which is what they promised us during the campaign trail, and then what was actually delivered. So slashing the deficit through deep spending cuts, and then what the actual bill delivers is an increase in the deficit due to permanent tax cuts with no offset of those tax cuts. Then the national debt. Their job was to start reducing the national debt. That's $30 trillion large. And instead, the debt continues to rise annually with no repayment plan, and we're adding to the deficit this year. They were supposed to reduce defense spending. They're supposed to audit and reduce the Pentagon waste. That's what we voted for. Instead, they increase from 680 billion up to $1 trillion. This is not what the fuck I voted for. So we'll cover this in a little bit. The trade is playing out as of right now. I'm not going to jinx it here, but there's a few videos about the spending bill that I want you guys to watch that I found very important. There's a few Republican congressmen as well as some Democrat congressmen that have opposed that bill for solid reasons. This is one of them. This is fuck. I'm going to skip out on his name. Okay. But we also have David Friedberg from the All In podcast who's been screaming about this from the rooftops. But we'll listen to the folks that voted down the bill a couple of days ago, and let's hear their reasoning for why they did so.
Chairman, look, apart from someone that represents Christ in the way that I operate in this building and being a good husband and a great father to my children, something stands out to me more so than anything else in the way that I conduct my life. It is to be a person of truth. And I think as some of us are having real consternations this morning because of feeling like that there is truth on both sides. We had a blueprint, but there's also truth in the fact that $50 billion was added that is not part of the blueprint. And so was, the instructions fully met. It's truth that that element is lacking, and that has to be reconciled, not in truth with what the blueprint laid out. The second part, to be a person of truth, has to be the scores. And when you look at, because that's the decision before us today, are we, as people of truth, do these scores pan out? And what I saw happen in Oklahoma in my time in the state legislative body, trying to repeal wind tax credits, 60 lobbyists from other countries, Italy, Spain involved, diverged on the Capitol. And it took from the 90s, as Governor Keating discussed in the 2018 era when we were trying to repeal these, it was never intended to last as long as it did. And it was always the promise to end many years from now, which never materialized. And so when we've got a measure that says start date for ending is 4 years from now, and we also have elements of this as it currently stands that says you can enter a project in 2031 as a wind production entity and still be receiving taxpayer subsidies by 2040, to be a person of truth, I know what's going to happen. I know there are going to be lobbyists that are going to descend on this building. We'll get the savings up front. And years from now, when President Trump, who rightfully so is a champion for Indian, as he calls it, the Green New Scam, is no longer in office. This is designed, I'm sorry, but I think it's purposely designed. And I'm not challenging anybody's character. I am grateful to a speaker. I am grateful to a chairman of this committee. I'm grateful to.
I will judge a lot of people's character for voting for this shit, even though during the campaign trail they were all reformists, and now they just seem to go back to being status quo. Like, guys, I understand we have a lot of battles in the world, but what about us becoming more protectionist and us becoming America first? Meaning we're going to get out of a lot of these foreign conflicts, means we have to spend more on defense when we're basically urging the European Union and NATO to pay their fair share so we don't have to subsidize them as much. We don't have to subsidize Canada for 100 billion a year or Mexico for 300 billion a year. With all of these savings, why do we need to increase the defense spending?
To a leader that's engaging with us right now to try to figure this stuff out, to get to the truth. But I just want for my committee members to know my consternation, because as Patrick Henry once said, I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided. It's the lamp of experience. I know no other way to foretell the future than by the past. And until we...
I'm going to close out of this buy trade until we break back above support. Basically, I'm going to treat this like a buy stop. Well, actually, I'm going to I'll hold this position, but I'm not going to enter anything more. I'm not going to like double down on this trade. If we see a break back above the support, I'm getting back in. But if it closes with a solid body below this support level, then we're looking at a pretty tough road here. So I'll look to unwind the trade. So closure below the zone, no bueno. Closure above the zone with a wick, muy bueno. Got it? Put a 1 in the chat if that's clear. And mostly talking to the folks on Zoom here. Okay, Walter got it, Bianca got it, John got it, Devin, you got it. Good morning, everybody. So let's go back to seeing why this bill is such a shitty idea.
Timelines corrected, where it's a true repeal of wind and solar that is undermining our electric grid. 60% of all new generation in the last 2 years for the Energy Information Administration is wind and solar. So, and the super majority of components on solar, it's 61% of it's solar, and the super majority of those components are coming from China, undermining natural gas jobs all over this country. We have to fix this. I appreciate a chairman, speaker, and a leader right now as we're even talking, trying to figure this out so I can be a person of truth. Thank you. I yield.
I thank the gentleman from Oklahoma, who is indeed a person of truth. Now yield 3 minutes to the pride of the Palmetto State, Mr. Ralph Norman.
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for the job you've done on the Budget Committee. You've held fast. You've kept this committee going, and I just want to thank you and give you the credit.
In case you guys are just tuning in, we're going through probably the biggest story that no one's talking about, which is the thing that directly impacts Americans, that directs all the spending around the world, that directs all the contracts, all of the trade negotiations. It's the budget for the United States government. And the Trump proposed budget, this big, beautiful bill that's going to take care of everything. The way that the government typically works is all the stuff that you can't get passed because nobody wants to fund some stupid project, you throw into some omnibus massive bill that's hidden in page 100,001. And because the other side wants something so badly that's on pages 1 through 10, they'll let all the stuff that you hid inside of your bill slide. And so there's a lot of stuff in here that's hidden. All these bullshit fucking programs they said they were going to cut are not getting cut. We're adding 1.6 trillion to the debt. Well, we're not adding 1.6 trillion, but by 2033, we'll have added 1.6 trillion to the deficit to the point where we can't be paying the entire government budget every year on just the interest. Imagine you were paying your entire paycheck, both weeks, every single month, just on one credit card interest payment, not the principal. One card, one interest payment, your entire check. How can the government survive like this? It can't. And so we need to cut spending. And we were promised that with the Trump administration, and we got fucking bamboozled again. At least there's some common sense with some of the Republicans who like have to sleep at night or look themselves in the mirror and say, I have fucking grandchildren. And we can't completely go off the rails and just ignore this problem. This is like the biggest hidden problem. Everyone's talking about Qatar and all this bullshit. This is real. It's too late already, but anyways.
Credit for it. Great leadership. To my left, for my friends on the left, let me classify it this way. You're being untruthful. You can say however you want to say, but to say we're cutting Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security is simply untruthful.
Yeah,
you cannot cut
Ralph.
Social Security anyway. And, you know, what this boils down to is a complete, we're operating on two different universes. You think the tax money is yours, government is your God, and you That's what your bottom line that you have. You supported an administration and Joe Biden that train wrecked this country by letting 15 to 20 million illegals in this country where we have paid a price and are continuing to pay a price. Now, where are we on this bill? The tax cuts are great. The tax money is the taxpayers, not the government bureaucracy. And what we're dealing with now is so many good things that are happening. You can use class warfare, rich.
Bro, I'm an instant fan of this dude. The money does not belong to the government or the state or the bureaucracy. It belongs to the citizenry for whom that tax represents. No shit. But at least somebody's saying it.
Poor, black, white, you're off base. 77 million people told you were off base, and you're still off base. But here's the questions I would ask, and Mr. Chairman, I know you know this. Is it right for healthy, able-bodied Americans that could work, that don't work? It's over 25 million healthy, able-bodied Americans that don't work. Is it right for them to have a paycheck?
All right, we're going to come back to this. I think David Friedberg had the most concise point on this from the All In podcast. Let's hear what he has to say here.
He's got any chance of cutting the deficit?
I'll talk about the House tax bill, which I think is, to use your term, J.Cal, absolute disgrazia. I do not treat the situation as the fiscal emergency that it is. The bill ultimately is absolute disgrazia. If you're an American, you should feel shame that your elected officials are proposing that this is the bill that gets passed, that we vaporize this much money, that we put ourselves this much further in debt, that we do not treat the situation as the fiscal emergency that it is. The bill ultimately yields.
Just in case no one knows David Friedberg, he has sold a few companies for over $1 billion. He sold one to Monsanto, which was like a seed sort of tracking software. He has worked for Google as a high-level executive and part of their strategy teams. He's extremely competent and extremely capable and qualified to talk about this stuff. Multi-billionaire again, put the big B behind his name. He cares about this. And so I really trust his perspective on this, not because of the wealth thing, but mostly because of his competence. But he seems to kind of hit this right on the head.
No real change in the annual deficit. The annual deficit could climb to $2.5 trillion being added to the federal debt load every single year going forward. In fact, if you look at the Treasury yields, the 30-year is now kissing 5%. So the United States has called $37 trillion of debt. At 5%, we're paying close to $2 trillion a year just in interest on our debt as this debt gets refinanced. The interest rates are going up because the probability that the U.S. will default on its debt payments, which is what you're buying when you buy U.S. Treasuries, you're getting the U.S. government to pay you some number of dollars with interest over time. And the market is now demanding that that interest rate be as high as 5%.
Well, you're loaning the government money. And if the government seems more risky now because of how reckless it's getting with its spending, then you're going to demand a higher return on your investment because it's riskier. That one friend that like never gives you back your money, you're probably a little bit more hesitant to loan them money than the person who's always getting you back your money. And so if you're kind of like worried that the government is being irresponsible just for the risk that you're going to be taking, you're going to want to be compensated. And that's kind of why we look at the bond markets as sort of a forward-leading indicator or even a current sentiment indicator for what the capital markets demand based on what they perceive as the risk, right? So they think the government's being too reckless. They want a higher return. That's what he's talking about.
Because of this fiscal situation that the United States finds itself in, we are now burning an additional $2.5 trillion a year, adding to our debt load. We are in a fiscal crisis and we're not willing to admit it. And I've said this from day one, that DOGE can only do so much. And clearly that's the case where they're now talking about sub $300 billion a year in potential annual saving.
Just for the historical record, we are admitting it on this stream very, very clearly that this is not good. And if we do not reduce the spending, America will have to pay the consequences the next 5 to 7 years. And we'll all, chart addicts ain't going nowhere. We will be around to cover that. And I really, really do not want to, because it's going to be a very sad day. Not for us, because we'll be rich as fuck. But, just to see the situation of what's happening. So ideally, we can get enough people who are not so hungry to move up in Trump's administration that can actually stick to their principles that everyone voted for, which is reducing the government spending and making your children's lives in this country more prosperous and have a better opportunity than you did. Not the other way around, kind of pulling their wealth into the present, spending all of it on bullshit, and then making them have to carry the bag later for shit they didn't even vote for.
Things from Doge action. At the end of the day, Congress needs to take action. And this bill from Congress doesn't take much action. I will tell you that if you look across the board, all of these programs are still being proposed to be run at a cost that is well in excess of their pre-COVID levels. And so I would set.
No, I'm still in. I didn't say I closed. I was going to close 50%, but I'm going to hold this. I'm not entering anything more until I see this next hourly candle closure, but still in.
Two guiding principles. If I was to be the benevolent dictator of the United States of America, my guiding principle number one would be that any program that we intend to continue to persist have its budget level cut to pre-COVID, to 2019 levels. Second would be, and if we did that, by the way, we would be in a much better fiscal situation. The second would be that we add no new programs in the moment. There's a whole bunch of new thrown into this bill, as well as increasing the cost and a few cuts here and there. I'll just highlight a couple that I think are worth noting. You know, there's a cut in the SNAP program, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. That's food stamps. And I talked about this with Brooke Rollins in the interview I did a few weeks ago. You can watch it on YouTube. And we talked a little bit about how this SNAP program has absolutely exploded in size from 60 billion a year in 2019 to 120 billion a year today. So in this budget proposal, they're actually cutting it back by about 30 billion, so to 90 billion. So it's still 50% higher than it was pre-COVID. And there's a lot of kind of stories we could go through on what happened.
And by the way, that's the healthy metric to use, which is before the money printing happened and this exorbitant spending happened, what were the levels of all these different agencies? What was the budget? And that's a pretty healthy level to try to aim back towards as like our neutrality, as sort of like equilibrium, is instead of kind of looking at what is the current spending versus the proposed spending from Trump, it's like, yeah, anything that was done in the last 3 years is exorbitant. So that's a horrible comparison. If we're going to compare things to pre-COVID, that's a pretty healthy place to gauge whether or not we're actually increasing the budget or decreasing the budget. And we are failing horribly at that. In the article that we just put up, you guys can see side by side all the different expenses, like line item by line item, to see how they're either getting cut or they're getting boosted by like 250 billion.
During COVID that caused this thing to blow up the way it did, but political wrangling pulled money out of the government into people's pockets, and that is persisting today. I'm a big believer in cutting taxes. Obviously, I'm probably more libertarian than anyone else on this show or that we've ever had on this show. But at the end of the day, you can't just say, hey, let's cut taxes and spend more than we're making. It doesn't make sense. A lot of this stuff's going to be exploitable. The tips and overtime exclusions are a way to pander to people to get votes and now keeping your promises on those votes. I think at the end of the day, the tips and overtime rule could invite a lot of gamesmanship and loopholes that will be created, and people will wake up and be like, uh-oh. For example, if I'm an independent contractor, I will enter into a contract with someone that says, here's the service I'm providing you for $50. And then there's an optional tip you can give me at the end.
All right, well, don't say you're a snitch on the play, bro.
And then I won't pay taxes on that tip. And I can give you 100 other examples that this will create an inordinate number of crazy, insane loopholes.
Yes, we have a lot of Fed speakers that spoke this morning, and we have more Fed speakers that are speaking later. The biggest one I'm paying attention to is Kashkari. We'll talk about why in a bit, but yes, we have basically every Fed member or every member of the FOMC speaking today. So it's going to be a pretty big day, but it's non-consequential. These are all pre-scheduled. That's why they're showing up as low impact news events. But if you guys do see jumps in the markets around these key times, like 10 a.m., we have the CB leading index, and then we have 115. Just know there is some news events, or there are some news events playing out.
The interest on the debt at $1.9 trillion a year equates to 7% of GDP. That means 7 cents of every dollar that moves in every transaction in this country is being used to pay down interest on money we overspent in the past. It has become an absolute crisis. I think that there's a few folks that should be shout out on this, which is Senator Paul and Senator Ron Johnson, who both highlighted how ridiculously under-impressive the spending cuts are in this bill. I think we've got a lot of work to do. I'm deeply disappointed. I'm scared, and I hope that that this.
All right, scared is crazy. People, we don't do fear on this live stream. All right, so let's go ahead and get that notion out real quick.
All gets kind of fixed up in reconciliation.
Do you think that we should line item out all the new spending, irrespective of what it
All
is?
new spending line itemed out. That's rule one, and rule two is all existing programs
glad.
got to go back to.
I'm glad we were able to do that. Link in the description. But the most important thing I want you guys to see is the promises kept versus promises made. All right. Everything from defense spending, national debt, bringing that down, reducing the federal budget deficit. None of those are being met. Corporate welfare. Nope. Medicare or Medicaid and SNAP. Foreign aid. All right. Supposed to be shrinking the budget, and we're not. These people are really, really concerned with optics over objective. Oh, let's go. All right, trade is popping off. I'm going to play this in the background while I pause my screen share and close out some trades. I'm going to close some partial profits here because this thing just boomed. But if you're in this trade, let me know. Put something in the chats. It's the market open. The market is subject to reverse in the next 5 minutes. So if you're going to get greedy and stay in, make sure you accept the consequences. Okay. I'm going to personally be taking partial profits, and I'm going to put my stops and break even because it's the market open. But over the next 5 to 7 minutes, we should get the next pump to new highs. And then we can start the retracement, et cetera, et cetera. But I think we're going to get a pretty good push from here.
Pre-COVID levels. You do those two things, we're in a great place.
Yeah, and just to put some numbers and some charts behind it, here is the debt back to Clinton era. Clinton added 392 billion in 8 years. It's barely noticeable on the chart.
I'd say like another 40, 50 points minimum before we see some kind of correction here. So make sure you guys are being responsible.
40, 50 billion a year. Bush, 5.4 trillion, 4 years, about 1.3 trillion a year. Obama, $1 trillion a year. And then we get to Trump 1.0, 2 trillion a year. Suddenly we decided we would double it. Biden, same thing. They added almost exactly the same amount to
But the
trillion
right way
a
to-
year. And
Yeah,
then
the right way to
Trump
think
right
about
now
this,
is on
J-Cal.
track to do the same.
Yeah, it's not total dollar amount, it's percent of GDP that you're
Sure.
adding. And, you know, right now at $2.5 trillion a year of deficit, we're talking about a deficit to GDP of like 8%.
Yes.
8% a year. This is like Argentina. This is like insane. The fact that we don't treat this like a fiscal emergency and everyone goes up and they tout, oh, we're going to make 60 billion in cuts in Medicaid. That's out of $820 billion of annual spend. You know, oh, we're making 30 billion in cuts in SNAP. That's still 50% higher spend in total than we were in 2019, a few years ago, when we didn't have that much of a problem. This has become like such a reset of expectations. And I worry again that we went into this, I think, in a very optimistic way, thinking that this administration was going to treat things differently. We had Doge, we had alignment on the importance of the budget. Besson has highlighted it. And then it's kind of back to gamesmanship in DC. All these representatives from Congress show up and try and get money for their constituents in a way that is not sustainable. We're not going to be able to keep this up, and we're not really having the hard and tough conversation.
No. He's spitting bars. I'm going to have to rewind this. I'm sorry.
And that we went into this, I think, in a very optimistic way, thinking that this administration was going to.
And if you think you don't care about this topic, trust me, I know it's early. Everyone's got work and shit, whatever. You're going to care about this. I promise. When taxes go through the roof because we have to somehow finance this, and you realize that you're working your fucking ass off and slaving away, and all this money is going just to pay the interest on the debt, you're going to feel some kind of way about how the government mismanaged your money. And we don't want to wait until it's too late, because when it's too late, it's fucking too late. And so if we do it now, ideally we can avoid that moment. People, market's still pumping. Market is still pumping. I'm trying to get a check here. We're up about 80 points. This thing is absolutely blasting. But I think we have another 20, 30 points before we start to see a retracement. Couple minutes left. So There's going to be the retest at the market open. Make sure you guys have taken partials if you choose to. Not financial advice, but personally, I already did.
Going to treat things differently. We had Doge. We had alignment on the importance of the budget. Besson has highlighted it. And then it's kind of back to gamesmanship in DC. All these representatives from Congress show up and try and get money for their constituents in a way that is not sustainable. We're not such a goes up and they
My bad. I didn't zoom back far enough. It's got to be right here at the 7
annual spend. You know, oh, we're making 30 billion in cuts in SNAP. That's still 50% higher spend in total than we were in 2019, a few years ago, when we didn't have that much of a problem. This has become like such a reset of expectations. And I worry again that we went into this, I think, in a very optimistic way, thinking that this administration was going to treat things differently. We had Doge. We had alignment on the importance of the budget. Besson has highlighted it. And then it's kind of back to gamesmanship in DC. All these representatives from Congress show up and try and get money for their constituents in a way that is not sustainable. We're not going to be able to keep this up, and we're not really having the hard and tough conversations we need to be having. And every year, everyone wants to get elected by keeping programs and keeping money flowing that their constituents elected them to do. And they want to add new programs so they can go on CNBC and say, look at this cool new program I stood up. It's great. It's going to create the future of America. And meanwhile, there's no future of America because we're burning $2.5 trillion a year. It is like an existential.
Put W David in the chat. Dude, we need important people and smart people that, because a lot of people watch the All In podcast. We're talking about politicians who are looking for funding from these billionaire guys. We're talking about folks who run massive media platforms like a Ben Shapiro. They have the CEOs of Uber on every week. They have the CEOs of Tesla, the CEOs of, Tesla. We're talking about Elon. Like, these guys are connected to everyone in Silicon Valley. Chamath was a founder in Facebook. David Friedberg was one of the early founders in the Google sort of Plex. Like, these guys are super competent in this space. They understand money, and they're trying to protect the fact that they want to keep living here rich. Everyone's like, oh, what's their ulterior motive? Clearly, they don't want this show to fucking end, and neither do any of us. So I really respect David Friedberg for speaking out, making it so poignant, and really harping on this since the 2020 election, making it a single issue. Trail your stops, because this trade is pumped. Okay, we got another couple minutes before we can expect some kind of retracement. So whatever you haven't taken off the table, consider the markets. Okay, make sure you set real expectations when you're trading. Do not overstay your welcome.
Potential crisis that no one's willing to stand up and highlight just how critical this emergency is. $2.5 trillion of deficit spending on a $28 trillion GDP. Tell me when in history that's actually worked out at the end of the day, except when you're in some war and you're going to end up taking over some country and getting all their resources.
And as you mentioned, this has knock-on effects with regard to things like de-dollarization. Why are you investing in the American dollar if you believe
that's right. That's
that
why
the dollar is going to?
This is the debt. This is the debt spiral that we find ourselves in, because what happens is people stop owning treasuries when they start to question whether or not 30 years from now the U.S. government is going to meet its debt obligations. Even the smallest marginal question of that drives interest rates up 1%, 2%. Suddenly, your 30-year treasury yields at 6%, 7%. And then your interest rates climb, and then your deficit spending climbs, and that's how it becomes a spiral. So now the debt goes up even more than it did the year before. And then the next year it goes up even more per year than it did the year before. That's why it's called a debt-death spiral. One of the things I've heard in a lot of members of cabinet that I've met with over the last couple of months is we've got all these new sources of revenue. I had an interview with Doug Burgum. He talked about unlocking America's assets. We've got this balance sheet with lots of assets. We're going to do land leases and all sorts of other things. We met with Lutnick. He's going to sell the Trump gold card, the immigration card.
Yeah. All right. Well, ain't that quick? Ain't it beautiful how it works sometimes? We don't normally trade right at the market open or pre-open, but if that's what the market's given us, it's what the market's given us. This was 10 minutes. Okay. We still have 6 minutes in this 15-minute candle, which means this whole move has happened in 9 minutes-ish. But it took hours of setup, and now, geez, Louise, 130 points and running. All right, I'm completely out of the trade. I'm actually going to close out the rest while I pause the screen share here. But let me know where you guys are sitting on profits for the day, etc., in the Zoom chat. Let me see what you guys are sitting on while I close this. Wow, few minutes. We're expecting some kind of pullback. Let's keep an eye on this.
card. We met with Bessent. He's got these ideas on how we're going to drive. Everyone's got great theory on how we're going to grow GDP and actually grow government revenue. But until those dollars start to flow in,
Jensen,
we have to get
I'd
our
like to
fiscal
see
house in
that.
order.
Yes, sir.
We have to cut spending. When those dollars start to flow in, then you can start to spend. But you can't spend ahead because otherwise the cost of the debt and the economics uncertainty is going to limit our ability to execute on the back end on that revenue generation.
All right. Well, the folks that voted against this guy is not really saying much. Let's see. Chip Roy, he had like a bit of a temper tantrum, but let's see what he got.
Hardworking American.
140 points and counting. Good stuff. Anyone on YouTube take this trade? Where are you guys sitting? Or are you guys asleep?
It'll benefit from child tax credits and lower tax rates. Stop.
That Chip Roy, 3 minutes.
I appreciate my friend from Texas, the chairman, and there my Democratic colleagues go again, telling things that are not true. The vast majority of Americans will get tax benefits under this bill. It's just simply false to say that that's not true. Hardworking Americans who will benefit from the standard deduction increase. Hardworking Americans will benefit from child tax credits and lower tax rates. Stop saying things that aren't true. Those things are true. The fact is we have money in here for border to undo the damage of Joe Biden. We have more money in here for the defense to undo the damage of Joe Biden. But we also address Medicaid, and Medicaid spending goes up. Stop lying. Medicaid spending goes up.
The issue with the tax cuts is like, yes, people get a temporary relief because you don't have to pay as much in taxes. Social Security is not getting taxed. Taxes on tips. There's no tax on tips, no tax on overtime pay. This is incredible. But if you do not have, if it's like a gamble plan on how we're going to make up the difference in that spending, it's like not only are we not addressing the issue of this national debt and the deficit, we're actually making it worse. But I believe in Trump and I believe in the innovation that we're bringing to America. This is a longer to medium term play for all of the productivity growth to hit. In the short term, yes, we're going to have the tax cuts. If you don't have an immediate way to replenish that budget deficit, because if you're not bringing in all that money from those taxes, it's got to come from somewhere. Otherwise, we're in a deeper fucking hole than we were before. And I get it. It's like maybe short term. But the thing is, this is not the time for gambles. Those sort of things, we actually can reappropriate enough funds to replenish those aspects of the budget that we're looking to cut with the tax cuts. We can find it somewhere else and then reappropriate it in the short term until the productivity starts to kick in. I just don't think that gambling with it is a good idea.
My colleagues on the other side of the aisle are profoundly unserious.
All right, relax.
About what's happening with the numbers. I applaud Chairman Arrington. I applaud my colleagues on this side of the aisle for taking a step forward in dealing with the spending problem in this town. But I have to now admonish my colleagues on this side of the aisle. This bill falls profoundly short. It does not do what we say it does with respect to deficits. The fact of the matter is, on the spending, what we're dealing with here on tax cuts and spending, a massive front-loaded deficit increase. That's the truth. That's the truth. Deficits will go up in the first half of the 10-year budget window, and we all know it's true. And we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't say that we're doing something we're not doing. The fact of the matter is, this bill has backloaded savings and has front-loaded spending. Nowhere near the Senate budget top line, by the way. The Senate budget top line of $6.5 trillion, which, by the way, is what we were pre-COVID, inflation adjusted on interest, on Medicaid, on Medicare and Social Security. And if we would reform Medicaid, we could actually get to the core of the problem. But we refuse to do it. And I'm not going to sit here and say that everything is hunky-dory when this is the budget committee. This is the budget committee. We are supposed to do something to actually result in balanced budgets, but we're not doing it. Look at what happens under deficits. By the way,
the government is not cutting spending. Oh, this is fucking miraculous. This guy's about to have an aneurysm over fucking something we learned in the third grade. You guys remember Schoolhouse Rock? Right? I don't remember the full words, but it went something like, yeah, it's all cooked. China bought half of it. APAC owns the rest. I don't know. Look, I fell asleep in class. It was something like that. Okay? Something about the bill going to committee, but then it was like, oh, the Chinese own half of Congress. You guys remember the thing? We all sang the song. All right. I got the before and after here, obviously, because if I don't flex, did the trade really happen? Like, you know what I'm saying? If we don't show the before and after every single time that we hit the stream, Did a trade really fall? 150 points and counting. This thing is absolutely ripping. No matter where you got in, you made some profits. Just make sure that you guys are responsible with walking away with profits. That's the name of the game, people. The name of the game is not staying in a trade, being in a trade the longest, who managed to stay in longer than somebody else, who got more pips. No, the name of the game is walking away with profits. So make sure that you're prioritizing for that objective above anything else. There's a lot of news here about Turkey and Trump, etc. Let's see what we got going on. Oh, I heard Scott Bessent and Kristen Walker got into it. Let's see what they got over here.
Welcome back. There are new economic warnings after the credit ratings agency Moody's downgrade.
So over here we have Kristen Walker from Meet the Press and CNBC, one of my least favorite reporters in the world, extremely corrupt, etc. But we have the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Haven't heard from him in probably a week since the China negotiations last Saturday. So like not like a few days ago, but the Saturday prior. Haven't really heard from him, and he was on the news every single day before that. So it kind of seems like the Chinese have a very big respect for private negotiations. You don't go out and talk about any details prior to things getting signed because it fucks up the deal. And so I think that we're adopting a bit of that sort of culture where we don't want to fuck up all of our trade deals by being loudmouths and stuff. It works on this side of the pond, does not work over there. But it's, we finally got a word from Scott Bessent. Let's see what he had to say with updates.
Rated the United States credit rating one notch from its AAA rating. Moody's citing concerns over the nation's rising debt. It comes as President Trump's tax bill suffered a setback in Congress this past week. Joining me now is Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Secretary Bessent.
Yo, members, how's the difference in audio between when I talk and then when the video plays? Is it about the same, or is the video too loud, or what's the deal here?
Welcome back to Meet the Press.
It's good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
It's wonderful to have you on after a long foreign trip. Thank you for being here. Let's start right there with Moody's downgrading the nation's credit rating, and they do cite the debt. I want to read you a little bit of what Moody's says. It says, quote, if the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is extended, which is our base case, it will add around $4 trillion to the deficit over the next decade. Several Republicans, Mr. Secretary, are citing similar concerns. Does the president's tax bill need to do more to address the nation's debt and deficit?
Well, Kristen, first of all, I think that Moody's is a lagging indicator. I think that's what everyone thinks of credit agencies. Larry Summers and I don't agree on everything, but he said that when they downgraded the U.S. in 2011. So it's a lagging indicator. And just like Sean Duffy said with our air traffic control system, we didn't get here in the past 100 days. It's the Biden administration and the spending that we have seen over the past 4 years. We inherited 6.7% deficit to GDP, the highest when we weren't in a recession, not in the war, and we are determined to bring the spending down and grow the economy.
Fair enough, but under President Trump's first
190 points and counting. This trade boomed.
Administration, he added $8 trillion to the nation's debt in his first term. So there's plenty of blame to go around.
No. But let's review. We were in the rescue portion of COVID. The Biden administration was in the recovery portion. And Kristen, it would have been, if not for Senator Manchin and
almost 200 points. Also, side note, this is the biggest economic debate, I think, of of our time today. This is the thing we got to talk about. I've already talked to Bob Elliott and other top economists about the deficit, the debt, and they basically I hate this shit, but the way the game is set up is it's all rigged because the ability for the US to print money kind of gives us the advantage. And so we can't really go into the same sort of debt spirals or hyperinflation crises that other countries go into by playing this fucking game. However, the biggest question is Trump was in charge of Operation Warp Speed. Trump did start quantitative easing 4, the fourth facility of QE, which pumped fucking $15 trillion into the economy. But we did reduce inflation prior to Trump getting out of office. And so when he handed the torch over, technically there wasn't, You know, like he didn't do too much damage other than the fact that 33% of all the dollars in circulation were printed in the last 4 years. Were basically printed in the 2 years post-COVID. Like that's a lot of fucking money that's in the system for 100-year currency, you know? So the question is, Trump really did pump all this money in. If he had stayed in and he was allowed to sort of do his uh original plans, would this have actually resulted in inflation staying down, etc.? I don't know. Bidenomics clearly played a role because when inflation was already at 6%, Biden signed the $2 trillion bill. But that's what's happening now. Is like, okay, inflation is down and things are cool, but like the deficit is ballooning and we're going to pump 2 trillion. That's Trumponomics. That's not good. This is like a replay of pumping money into a bad situation and exacerbating the problem. So I think we're kind of falling into the same trap, and I don't understand why no one's talking about that.
Cinema, who are no longer in the Democratic caucus, it would have been 4 or 5 trillion more.
It did include the tax cuts as well. But let me ask you about Walmart, this big news from Walmart. It says it will start raising prices on its consumers, Mr. Secretary, as early as this month due to the tariffs. Now, President Trump out with a very stern warning on social media saying Walmart, quote, should eat the tariffs, adding the company made far more than expected last year. Is the president asking American companies to be less profitable?
I was on the phone with Doug McMillon, the CEO of Walmart yesterday, and Walmart is in fact going to as you describe it, eat some of the tariffs that.
That's a big deal because in the capitalist system that we have in a free society, the government cannot, I want to say, pressure or force any private company to do something, especially that has to do with the prices that they set, the profit margins they're allowed to make, the free market system where supply and demand runs the show. Like if people want it at that price, they're going to buy it. But just to have the relationships that Besant has and to pick up the phone and just casually talk to the CEO of Walmart, explain the situation, explain their insider plan. Because again, guys, Trump and Besant are not telling us the full plan. And so they have private information that we're not privy to that is affecting their decisions. And that's why some things may seem irrational to us. And so he might call the CEO of Walmart, tell him the plan. And the CEO of Walmart's like, okay, I'll eat the tariffs for a little bit because I know I'm going to get rich on the back end with the tax cuts and with the productivity growth. And I think that slowly but surely, people are starting to see the vision. The issue with that is you can't just keep going one by one. There's 500 companies in the S&P 500. There's like 10 that matter. Well, I guess you can do 10 individual deals, but it would be much better. Like this is the fucking gamble we make with Trump, y'all. Is this strategic ambiguity or this I guess that's what it is, strategic ambiguity, which is you never let them know your next move. It works, but then when these executives are trying to build a plan forward for their companies, they're just as confused as the ops. And so I don't know. I guess we're kind of lucky that we have these cabinet officials that have such great relationships, which is probably why Trump picked them. But without that, this would be a massive fucking mess. So long story short, these guys are the only ones that can pull this shit off.
Just as they did in 18, 19, and 20. The other thing, though, that we are seeing that Doug passed along to me, that with their consumer, the single most important thing is the gasoline price. And gasoline prices have collapsed under President Trump. So we are seeing that. The other thing that will happen, that is a direct tax cut for consumers. Then the transportation costs are also a big input. So let's see what happens. What you were describing was Walmart's earnings call. The other thing that companies have to do, they have to give the worst case scenario so that they're not sued. So, I think overall we are seeing a decline in services, inflation, and we saw inflation come down for the first time in 4 years.
Well, in my conversation with former Vice President Mike Pence, he says he sees tariff as a tax. How far, Mr. Secretary, is the president, is the administration willing to go to prevent CEOs from increasing prices?
Well, I think what we're hearing here is that people are saying tax increases are inflationary. That when I was testifying before Congress last week, one of the congressmen said that, and I said, well, Congressman, if taxes are inflationary, let's cut taxes. So let's get this tax bill done, bring down taxes, which according to this line of thinking should be disinflationary.
But the Federal Reserve has said that tariffs are inflationary. Just to be very clear, you said you called Walmart. Is that what CEOs can expect, that the president, that other members of the administration will apply pressure to try to prevent them from passing on these prices?
See, again, relationships is really what's going on here. And then Kristen Walker, again, the worst of the fucking worst, can't fucking stand her. She's trying to paint this as we're exerting influence and pressure on these companies. Now, guys, look, without passing exorbitant laws that would trample on everybody's rights, there really are not that many ways to get these companies to just hold the fucking line long enough for these places to work. And they were right. They made way more profits last year than anyone expected. And really, it was because they already had a lot of their goods in storage, or kind of like when they bring them in, they kind of have them in these third-party facilities. And then they were able to take advantage of the inflation in a lot of these goods. So they were basically just charging people more, even though it didn't cost them more, and they made a shit ton of money. Now, can they hold the line? Yes. Can they afford to? Fucking definitely. Does the government have an obligation to sort of make their plan work? Yes. If this is what's got to happen, I'd much prefer this than them trying to pass laws behind the scenes about anti-monopoly this and that, and trying to like do anti-price gouging laws. This is how you deal in a free market system. You get people that have experience and influence in relationships, and then you allow that to sort of make your job easier by them clearing the way, which is what Besant did by calling the CEO of Walmart.
CEOs?
I didn't apply any pressure. Doug and I have a very good relationship, so I just wanted to hear it from him rather than second, third hand from the press. And again, as I said, this is all from their earnings call, and on an earnings call, you have to give the worst case scenario. Kristen, to go back to what you said, the Federal Reserve is not saying that tariffs will cause inflation. They're saying they're not sure and that they're in wait and see mode.
Let's talk about the other.
Like, if the Fed doesn't know, who does, and who is supposed to?
Big news that you were a
Jensen, congratulations on max profits, bro. $20 from a payout. God is good and God is great every day in every way.
part of a week ago in Switzerland.
We're going to do a call here pretty soon with Jensen, talking about how he scaled these accounts and how he's able to get these massive payouts. So if you're a member, something to look forward to. Jensen, congrats again, bro. And congrats to everybody who took the trade. If you didn't and you followed your rules, congrats. If you broke your rules and didn't trade, or if you broke your rules and did trade, time for a review. Time to walk away with a review.
Negotiating with Chinese officials, you and the administration lowered tariffs from the high rate of 145% to 30% for 90 days to allow talks to continue. But President Trump had said previously, and I'm quoting from him, China needs to make a deal with the U.S. We don't have to make a deal with them. So why did the United States back down?
Neither side backed down. Both sides realized that this, as I had said, that it was unsustainable. So we had the equivalent of an embargo, which is not what either side wanted. It was this constant tit for tat escalation. So both sides brought the tariffs down by 115%. So for 2025, we have increased tariffs on China by 30%. They have increased them by 10 on us. We now have a mechanism in place to continue talks.
Okay. On Friday, as a piece of this, President Trump, while he was on the foreign trip, said that countries should expect letters from you, from Secretary Lutnick, saying this is what the tariff rate is going to be. Mr. Secretary, does that effectively mean that these negotiations with other countries are over? And how high should they expect tariffs to go? Above 10%?
This means that they're not negotiating in good faith. They are going to get a letter saying, here is the rate. So I would expect that everyone would come and negotiate in good faith.
You expect that rate, though, that you would slap on any country that you think is not negotiating in good faith to be above 10%?
Well, I think that it would be the April 2nd level. Some countries were at 10%, some were substantially higher. And the negotiating leverage that President Trump is talking about here is if you don't want to negotiate, then it will spring back to the April 2nd level.
I have to ask you about the war in Ukraine. President Trump saying he is going to speak with President Zelensky and Putin on Monday. Former Vice President Pence told me it is time to impose harsh sanctions now. What say you, Mr. Secretary? Is it time to impose sanctions against Russia?
Well, I think we will see what happens when both sides get to the table. President Trump has made it very clear that if President Putin does not negotiate in good faith, that the United States will not hesitate to up the Russia sanctions along with our European partners. What I can tell you is
So keep in mind, right now, Russia isn't doing too hot. Back into the Biden presidency, but the Russian economy was doing, honestly, I want to say it was doing relatively well because it was compared to the European Union. It was doing great. And the biggest reason was the oil prices. So as there was a demand for oil and there was less of a supply, prices went up. And so I'll give you guys kind of the first end, which is the largest component of Russian GDP is oil. So as prices went up, their GDP went up. They were making more money. Now, here's the most fucked up part. This is kind of like Trump's one of his biggest criticisms of Europe, specifically of Germany, is signing a deal to become dependent on Russia for oil. So Europe is at war with Russia, but they also need oil from them. So they're buying oil from them, which Russia can shut off at any point because they're at war. And you're like, oh, you guys keep supporting the Ukrainians and keep supporting this to prolong. So what is stopping Russia from just cutting off those supplies? And luckily, I think this was 2023, but Europe didn't have that bad of a winter, and so they kind of lucked out. But still, giving that trigger to your kind of biggest adversary, not a very smart move. Now, at the same time, as the price of oil went up, Europe was funding Putin's war. Because as they were paying more for oil, they're putting money in his pocket, funding the other side of their war, and giving money to Ukraine, funding that side of the war. It's fucking retarded. All right, so long story short, now that oil prices have come down significantly, you guys can we went through the price per barrel last stream. We might go through it again. The Russian economy is not as strong as it was. They're not as emboldened to continue this needless war. Neither is Iran, which is one of their largest exports is oil on the black market. Like their black market buyers don't have to buy it from them at a discount if the market prices have come down and they're like around the same. I don't want to go break the law and like go buy this illegal oil when like I can $5 more. I'm gonna go just play by the rules over here and not deal with the US. So I think we significantly weakened their leveraging ability, and that's what we're seeing now. But if Putin continues to play dirty, then Trump said he's not willing to negotiate. He's going to go harsher on the sanctions, which is going to squeeze the Russians. Okay, we're floating about 217 points on this trade. My, oh my.
Is the sanctions were very ineffective during the Biden administration because they kept them low because they were afraid of pushing up domestic oil prices.
Very quickly, how long for the timeline until you move to sanctions? Obviously, there's a call, but if the president doesn't feel like there's progress, how much time is he going to give them?
I'm not going to tie the president's hands in his negotiations.
Let me ask you, former Vice President Mike Pence echoed several of...
Who gives a fuck what Mike Pence has to say?
President Trump's, quite frankly, own allies in expressing concerns about this plane that Qatar has offered to President Trump. They are saying it sends the wrong message. It sends the wrong message and raises concerns ethically, raises concerns constitutionally, and about security. Why is it appropriate for the president to accept a $400 million jet from Qatar?
Well, it's not the president accepted it.
Congrats, Anthony. $841 profit off this trade. Good stuff.
Be the United States government. And Senator Mullins said this weekend that the talks had actually begun under the Biden administration. So, but Kristen, what I can tell you is I think this is a off-ramp for many in the media not to acknowledge what an incredible trip this was. That President Trump has brought back trillions of investments in the United States. Every stop we made, the enthusiasm in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, in the United Arab Emirates to invest in the United States, that they want to push more and more the funds here. And if we go back to your initial question on the Moody's downgrades, who cares? Qatar doesn't, Saudi doesn't, UAE doesn't. They're all pushing money in. They've made 10-year investment plans. So this administration, we're doing peace deals, trade deals, and tax deals.
And just very, very quickly, President Trump has said he plans to keep that plane in his presidential library after. But what do you say to some Republicans who argue it sends a message that the United States can be bought or that other countries can curry favor if they offer gifts?
I say that the gifts are to the American people. There's trillions of dollars of investments that are going to create jobs in the U.S., whether it's the UAE building this gigantic aluminum plant in Oklahoma, whether it's these data centers that Qatar is going to do, is $600 billion on its way to $1 trillion from Saudi, that it all accrues to the American people.
All right, Secretary Besson, I know you've had a long week traveling with the president. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Good to see you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top.
Okay. Good stuff. All right, White House press briefing ahead of Russia-Ukraine calls. This was streamed 2 minutes ago. Let's see if this is accurate. So, streamed 24 minutes ago, 31. Okay. Seems legit enough.
Pardon, President Trump alongside First Lady Melania.
All right. Yeah, members, you guys know the drill. Once the money's made, the money's made. This thing is still pumping. Wow. Wow, just wow. I wish they were all this easy. But let me know in the Zoom chat who took it. If you didn't take it, let me know as well. I want to know what everybody's kind of, what time everybody's on, just so I can provide that level of value. If you haven't taken a trade yet, I can point out some re-entries. If you are still in and you're trailing, I can give you guys some pointers. But just let me know what I'm dealing with here. And this press conference just happened, so let's review what Caroline Leavitt had to say.
Melania Trump will sign the Take It Down Act into law. First Lady Melania Trump was instrumental in getting this important legislation passed.
Louis said he made 8K. Congratulations, brother. Drop a super chat in the chats.
The Take It Down Act will protect victims of digital exploitation, hold internet platforms accountable by requiring them to remove such imagery from their platforms, and provide justice for victims by allowing prosecutors to go after those who publish non-consensual explicit images online.
I like this act. Basically, you posting pictures of somebody naked and they don't consent of it. Now they got to take it down. I don't know how the fuck it took so long for a civilized society to get here, but guys, we fucking asked for the Epstein files and we got this shit, God. But I mean, anyways, we'll celebrate a win when it's a win.
The First Lady met with members in the House and the Senate, survivors and their families, and advocates throughout the process to get this bill across the finish line. We are grateful for the First Lady's hard work and dedication to this issue. And moving forward, she will continue to champion the well-being of our nation's children through her Be Best agenda.
Oh yeah, also massive, massive shout out to Melania Trump for really taking on the child exploitation topic, to like putting it on her back and taking it very fucking serious. Dude, I don't give a fuck who the messenger is or where who the instrument is for these changes. Whoever's prioritizing these kids, getting them back, and then really prioritizing ending this sickness that's going around. Massive, massive props. So, W Melania in the chats. She's fucking crushing it. Big ups.
I know the president looks forward to
The
signing
kids.
that bill into law later this afternoon, and we will see you all there. In other news, the One Big Beautiful Bill passed the House Budget Committee last night, bringing it one step closer to final passage. The One Big Beautiful Bill is perfectly named because it represents a once-in-a-generation opportunity to
Lies.
deliver on the Make America Great.
Notice how we just went through how trash that bill is, and so now we know. Like when you see somebody lying about a topic you know enough about, and you see their baseline lying face, now you start to realize these motherfuckers lie a lot. Okay, because she's lying right to our face. It was perfectly made. We just covered why it just completely betrayed the whole movement that we voted for, and she's just up here lying with a straight face.
Great Again agenda responsible for President Trump's landslide victory on November 5th. The America First policies in this bill are the reason why Republicans currently have the majority in Congress right now. Passing this bill is what voters sent Republicans to Washington to accomplish.
Dude, I'm gonna have to jump through my fucking screen. Dude, that's such a disrespectful lie. You guys, we just covered how we voted Trump in to reduce the budget, to reduce the deficits, to end all the wasteful spending that we're sending our hard-earned tax money for. And this thing not only fails at all of that, but also increases the spending, adds to the fucking deficit. Not in a productive way, but more in like we're going to give out some handouts here in the meantime while we make this bigger timeline play work. But let's not sit here and pretend that it does any of the things that anyone voted for. They're just kind of banking that the majority of the voters don't fucking know the difference.
And that's why it's essential that every Republican in the House and the Senate unites behind President Trump and passes this popular and essential legislative package. This bill will be the single most pro-small business, pro-family, and pro-American worker legislation ever. This bill will give Americans the largest tax cuts in our nation's history. When Republicans pass the bill, Americans will be keeping more of their hard-earned money and taking home much bigger paychecks. The One Big Beautiful Bill will deliver some of President Trump's central campaign promises. No tax on tips for our hardworking waiters, waitresses, and service workers. No tax on overtime for our law enforcement officers, our firefighters, and all those Americans who are putting in extra hours to make ends meet. And a large tax deduction on interest payments for Americans who purchase American-made cars. Despite desperate Democrat lies, the biggest beneficiary of this tax cut will be working-class Americans and their families. Americans earning between $30,000 and $80,000 per year will pay about 15% less in taxes after this legislation is passed. And according to a brand new paper from the White House Council of Economic Advisors, the average family with 2 children's take-home pay will be up to $13,000 higher because of the increase in wages and reductions in tax obligations. The CEA study also said that the average overtime worker receives a tax cut of roughly $2,000. Again, this is great news for our nurses, our police officers, and all those who work overtime to make ends meet across our country. Put simply, President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill will be a boon for working class America. This One Big Beautiful Bill is also pro-family. It will increase the child tax credit to $2,500 per child, establish optional savings account for newborn babies with a $1,000 credit added, and strengthen paid family leave. This bill also delivers historic tax relief to America's seniors by allowing middle and low-income Social Security recipients to deduct an additional $4,000 in payments from their taxable income. If Democrats get their way and the Trump tax cuts are not extended, Americans will face the largest tax hike in history to the tune of $4 trillion. Republicans must not side with Democrats in helping them raise taxes. The One Big Beautiful Bill also provides critical protections of Medicaid, which will strengthen and preserve the program for decades to come through common sense efforts to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. Medicaid will no longer be used to pay for barbaric gender mutilation procedures on minor children. And the 1.4 million illegal aliens who are currently improperly receiving Medicaid benefits will be kicked off the program to preserve it for hardworking American citizens who need it. President Trump and Republicans are protecting Medicaid benefits for pregnant women, children, disabled individuals, low-income seniors and families, and the most vulnerable Americans in our society. And that's what Democrats are so angry about. Basic Medicaid protections that will stop the funding of transgender insanity and illegal aliens from ripping off American taxpayers. As you all know, over his first 4 months in office,
Devaney, no. When it's looking pretty aggressive. I mean, obviously the sells are always there. You know the trades. We just filled the gap. The 88.6 scalp, but just keep in mind how aggressive the market has been. We're already about 45 minutes past market open, still no retest. So yes, a retest is due, but if it hasn't happened yet, then the market's probably going to keep pushing for a little bit. It's probably going to happen in the PM session. You know what to do. If you're going to take that trade, scalp it. Make sure that you understand you're trading against the daily trend. And so put your lot size accordingly.
as President Trump ended the previous administration's open border crisis and secured our homeland in record time, all using executive authority. Now Congress needs to act. The One Big Beautiful Bill is the most significant investment in our nation's border patrol and law enforcement agents in our nation's history. The bill ensures that President Trump's popular and successful border security measures are made permanent. Republicans have the backs of Border Patrol and ICE agents who were put through hell over the past 4 years and have quickly worked to secure our southern border. And that's why this bill gives them more resources to do their jobs, including a $10,000 much needed bonus to ICE agents and Border Patrol agents over the next 4 years. To provide those brave agents with desperately needed reinforcements on the ground, the bill allows for the hiring of thousands of new ICE personnel, customs officers, and Border Patrol agents. These significant hirings will empower President Trump to continue delivering on his promise to care.
See, that spending increase is acceptable because it was in line with the mandate that the voters voted for, which was so the number one mandate being securing the border. If we're all going to get our money stolen half the paycheck every 2 weeks and pay the government taxes, at least give us the stuff we voted for. And so let the money go to where it's supposed to. So closing the border, no one's really going to complain about that. And no one's going to complain about the reduction in waste and fraud either. Nicaraguan, Elmo, Sesame Street, whatever. It's the $250 billion increase in the defense budget. Even though we are reducing our global impact in these wars and making these different sort of like, what do they call it? Cooperative groups like NATO and the rest pay their fair shares. So if everyone's paying up their fair shares and we're not subsidizing folks no more, and we're not as involved in these foreign wars because number one, we're starting to get a bunch of treaties done and a bunch of peace negotiations. But two, we've kind of taken a protectionist stance away from intervention. And so if we don't need as big of a military and we already have an overbloated one and the budget's already crazy, why the fuck would we increase to 250 billion and undo all of the reduction in spending that we just made progress on? I don't understand.
Carry out the largest mass deportation in the history of our country. Again, that is a promise that Republicans made to American voters. It's a promise they were elected on, and it's a promise Republicans on Capitol Hill need to keep. Secure.
Let's go, Carlos.
Our border. To supplement those efforts, the bill's funds will fund the completion of President Trump's signature border wall. As a result, 701 miles of primary wall, 900 miles of river barriers, 629 miles of secondary barriers, and 141 miles of vehicle and pedestrian barriers.
And only 72,000 deportations
Will be constructed when this bill passes, along with cutting-edge technology to secure our homeland from dangerous illegal alien invaders. This bill also advances our national security and defense interests by ensuring the United States military has the necessary resources to remain the strongest and most lethal fighting force in the world. The bill will provide resources for the construction of President Trump's Golden Dome to safeguard Americans from potential attacks, give the Coast Guard resources to build more modernized ships, and the Air Force resources to acquire better planes. If all of those incredible things were not enough, the Big Beautiful Bill also finally modernizes air traffic control in America, a bipartisan issue. The bill will allow President Trump to deliver on his promise to overhaul and update our air traffic control systems to keep Americans flying as safe and efficiently as possible. The previous administration failed to act and do this themselves, despite repeated warnings from the GAO, which has resulted in unacceptable delays at major airports like Newark that the Trump administration is working hard to address. When the One Big Beautiful Bill passes, we will replace the current antiquated system. The FAA will enhance safety in our skies, reduce delays, and power the future of air travel
There's no
in the United
money,
States.
there is literally no dollars that you can throw to fix JFK. Okay, Newark, we got a shot. EWR, you know what I'm saying? Maybe he's got a leg to stand on. JFK, Moses himself will come back and ain't no saving JFK.
That's just some of what this historic legislation will accomplish. It is absolutely essential that Republicans unite behind the One Big Beautiful Bill and deliver on President Trump's agenda. There is no time to waste. Americans gave Republicans a once-in-a-generation opportunity to course-correct our country over many wrongs over the past 4 years. And Americans are counting on Republicans to work as hard as President Trump is in this White House every day on Capitol Hill. Send this legislation to his desk as soon as possible for his signature. Here in our new media seat today, we have Liam Cosgrove, the White House correspondent for Zero Hedge. With that, Liam, please kick us off.
Thank you, Caroline. So,
Zero Hedge, please be good.
first question is on foreign policy.
Sure.
The president has made several moves towards peace in multiple fronts: India, Pakistan with the Houthis, talking with Iran, and talking with Putin. Biden didn't even talk to Putin for the entire span of the war, which is crazy considering two nuclear powers were engaged in a proxy war. So I do admire these moves by the current president, I'll be honest. However, as of today, we are still funding both Israel's and Ukraine's wars. So can Americans expect to finally be done financing foreign wars at some point? Do you consider that one of the president's goals?
Incredible. I thought I was going to disappoint, but came in with the right questions. At first, I was like, oh my God, I didn't know they gave out press passes to all the alternative media sources, but I didn't know that you could dick ride Trump like that without a license. But then he saved it at the end. Asked a really hard question.
Well, I think I can summarize the president's foreign policy agenda with 2 words: America first. And that means putting the American people and the American taxpayer first. And that's why the president is moving as quickly as he possibly can and working overtime to end these conflicts in both Israel and Gaza, and also the Russia-Ukraine war. As you all know, the president will be speaking with Putin at 10 o'clock. He plans to call President Zelensky when that call concludes. I spoke to the president about that call at 10 o'clock. I don't want to get ahead of those very important
that just happened 20 minutes ago. We'll see if there's any breaking news here about the contents of that
conversations, but of course you will hear directly from the president or me after those calls conclude today. So you can expect that. As for Israel and Gaza, the president continues to not only himself, but his national security team engage in talks on both sides of this conflict. The president made it very clear to Hamas that he wanted to see all hostages released. And last week, when we were flying out of town, there was great news on that front with the return of Eden Alexander, who is the last remaining hostage in Gaza. So to answer your question, the president is...
By the way, when you guys hear this, just to kind of give you guys some inside baseball, I think that the Trump administration finally is trying to kind of back away from having any involvement in the conflict. And sort of the last talking point of the advocates for U.S. involvement were saying that because there's U.S. What is it called? Because there's U.S. Hostages still in Gaza, that makes the U.S. somehow culpable in this conflict. And by releasing the final hostage last week, it kind of removes all association between the U.S. and this conflict. And so the pro-war folks who want us to get in with Iran kind of don't have a leg to stand on. The continued advocacy for involvement, financial or military, is starting to dwindle because the last line of sort of argument was we have U.S. hostages still stuck there, so it's a U.S. problem. And so now I think we're seeing a deliberate move from the U.S. or from the Trump administration to sort of distance themselves from that conflict. And I think they're going to make that final say here pretty soon.
He's always thinking about the American people, the American taxpayer first. He wants these conflicts to...
Devin, if you take the shorts, let us know, because we're seeing that right now.
end, not just to save money, but most importantly, to save lives.
Thank you. And my only other question for you is, so over the weekend, President Trump posted Truth Social, a video highlighting what most people call the Clinton body count, which is the strange number of suicides that seem to happen in Clinton circles.
Yo, there's no fucking way he posted the Clinton list on Truth. In case you guys don't know, the Clinton family has been associated with a ton of mysterious deaths around them of people who had classified information about them, their nefarious activities, and they just all happened to just mysteriously die. And this list is very long, and this has been an underground thing for years and years. But so was the Epstein thing, and then it finally came out. And so the fact that Trump posted the fucking Clinton list, dude, there's no way. People owe Alex Jones an apology for sure. Bro, because he knows he's in these circles, guys. He knows he's not going to post that shit the same way that somebody who's got like cheese crust over their face is reposting the post. He's had insider conversations. There's been some corroborated stories inside these circles, and he felt the need to risk his reputation by posting this. I feel vindicated. That's all I know. Another point for the conspiracy theorists. Trump peddles conspiracy theories. Like the first 20 searches are all just the CIA trying to get ahead of it. And of course, there's no mention of Truth Social on the front pages. Dude, come on. They're trying really hard to hide this thing. This is how bad this is for the deep state. You can see Axios, Yahoo. I put Truth Social twice just to get the fucking real Truth Social link. And it's not even on the first page. The Miller Center. What the fuck is that? It's not on the second page. Barack Obama on Twitter shows up before Trump's Truth Social does. That's fucking shady. Okay, going for 200 pips, currently 100 points of profit, 70 in profit. All right, make sure you take partial profits and make sure that you trail your stops after that second retest. Dude, they're really trying to hide this. Wow. They put serious money behind this SEO to hide this thing. We're going to have to go directly to Truth Social and just search Trump's tweets. A sick and horrible woman also happens to be grossly incompetent. Stone Cold Truth. Letitia James. Dude, this is nuts. He's just reposting a bunch of stuff from Truth Social. Comey going to jail, spiritual fighter. Trump. Where's Clinton, bro? All right. Well, while I find this thing, I'm going to let Caroline Levitt finish her statement.
I have a headline here from the Washington Post that said, Trump peddles false conspiracy theories tying the Clintons to several deaths.
Stephanie, like clockwork, I'm telling you, the strategy is perfect. Undefeated, undisputed. It's going to come back up for a retest, probably hit your break even, but then it's going to make the real drop. So just a heads up.
Just wanted to highlight real quick, this wasn't in Trump's video, but this is from the Arkansas Times. And it's the death of Mark Middleton, who was a former Clinton White House aide who was found dead on a Clinton Foundation property. And I'll just quote from the Arkansas Times. Middleton apparently shot himself in the chest with a shotgun and also hung himself from a tree with an extension cord.
Shot himself in the chest with a shotgun and hung himself on a tree with an extension cord. What the fuck?
So I have no idea how some.
By the way, in case you guys didn't get that, it's impossible. You can't hang yourself after you shoot yourself in the fucking chest with a shot. Who would shoot themselves in the chest with a shotgun in the first place? But if you did, you ain't hanging yourself. Clinton, shady. Trump posting this is very crazy, guys.
Somebody commits suicide that way, but if the Washington Post is here, maybe you can enlighten us as to how that was actually a suicide. So anyways, that's just a lead into my question about the most famous Clinton-related suicide, which is that of Jeffrey Epstein. There's still a lot of questions around that case.
Dude, look at the PSYOP. I'm on every page on Google, and it's just Yahoo, Fox, or Yahoo, CBS. It's all just this story propaganda. Trump peddles false conspiracy theories. Like, all I said was Trump Clinton video. That's all I said. I could have been searching for the goddamn debate they had the first time. That's how far ahead they went on defense mode. You don't go on defense like this unless you got something to hide. And I'm gonna find it. For fuck's sake. If you guys know where the Clinton video is, please just share it in the chat. Save me some trouble.
You've released phase one of the Epstein files. What was missing from that is any connection to his ties to intelligence agencies. And that's really the whole story, that not just trafficking young girls, but
Shout out to Zero Hedge. Give them a follow.
doing it on behalf of intelligence agencies and even potentially as part of a blackmail ring with potential ties to the Israeli government. So for phase two, when can we expect it? Will it have information pertaining to those aspects of the Epstein case?
I know the Attorney General has committed to releasing those files. I would defer you to the Department of Justice on her timeline, but when she has made a promise in the past, she has kept it, and I'm certain that she will in this case as well. Rachel.
Thanks so much, Caroline. The president set a 2-week deadline for Ukraine and Russia to negotiate a deal. That time is now up. Does the president intend to set a new deadline on this call with President Putin? And how much longer is he willing to get these talks?
Yeah, I don't want to get ahead of the specifics of the conversation the president will be having with President Putin in less than an hour this morning. But he has made clear throughout the entirety of this conflict since he inherited it.
All right, sorry guys, I gotta see this Clinton video that Donald Trump posted. Let's see if he actually exposed the Clinton machine or if he kind of just scraped the surface with it.
Kennedy Jr. He was declared the front runner for the New York Senate seat back in 1990.
By the way, I don't know the audio differences on X here, so if the audio is fucked up, just go ahead and put it in the chat. Let me know.
Days later, his plane crashed into the Atlantic Ocean, and his rival, Kennedy Jr. He was declared the front runner for the New York Senate seat back in 1999. Days later, his plane crashed into the Atlantic Ocean, and his rival, Kennedy Jr., he was declared the
Sorry, guys. I'm going to replay this.
White House intern. Rival, Hillary Clinton, was elected senator. Mary Mahoney was the Clinton White House intern. She knew enough of the inner workings of Bill's sexual advancements to be a star witness during the Clinton impeachment trials. She was brutally executed at a Starbucks she was managing in 1997. In 1993, White House.
So they're saying that a previous staffer that knew all about Clinton and all them secret, whatever the fuck they were doing, mysteriously died before she was supposed to testify in court. Okay, so that's one, 1997.
Vince Foster was found dead in Fort Marcy Park near D.C. He supposedly killed himself. And among a lengthy list of potential foul play, the bullet was never found.
Then there's James McDougal, a key witness for White House prosecutors. He was serving his 3-year sentence for bank fraud at the Fort Worth Federal Medical Center in Texas. And just before he was to give a testimony before the grand jury, McDougal suffered a heart attack in solitary confinement.
In 2015,
Heart attack and solitary confinement at 42? Eesh.
Walter
That's a little sus too.
a White House staff hired under Bill Clinton, joined the list. His body was found at the bottom of a river, nearly 2 miles from the base of the trail he was reportedly hiking. An autopsy determined that Shive's death was accidental drowning.
People, Trump posted this. Okay? When I used to say this shit fucking 2 years ago, you guys used to look at me crazy. You're probably still looking at me crazy. But the trade's hitting. So there's some disconnect there. Trying to figure it out. But now Trump is posting this vindicating all the conspiracy theorists about the shady actions surrounding the Clinton regime. One by one, people who have insider info on all the shady shit they've done, that have had a change of heart or some kind of moral standing or some balls that fucking dropped, want to tell the truth because it's eating them alive. And then they end up unalive. One by one. Trump posted this. We're only halfway.
Might have known too much.
This is like one of those videos they made you watch back in, in high school. They're like, oh, we're going to do a video day. And they'd bring in the projector. You remember the projector they'd bring in? Yeah, 90s kids, you guys know this. This sounds like one of those videos.
7-year-old Democratic National Committee staffer Seth Rich was shot and killed in D.C. this year. There is speculation that he was the source of the controversial leaked emails allegedly sent by DNC staffers, and that he may have been murdered in retaliation. Then Sean Lucas, the lead attorney in a fraud case against the DNC, was found lying on the bathroom floor by his girlfriend when she returned home on August 2nd. His death was reported classified, pending the results of an autopsy. Kennedy Jr.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, make sure to hit like and subscribe. It's like, no, I'm not going to end the stream on that note. It's a pretty grim note to end the stream on. But yeah, government shady. Caroline Levitt, let's see if she even answers the question. Dude, huge, huge shout out to Zero Hedge. I follow them on Twitter for fucking the last 5 years. They have great updates on economics, but these questions, dude, I'm very proud of them. And honestly, I think this move of letting alternative media into the press briefing room, one of the best decisions that's happened to American discourse. Because we're getting some like, dude, I was so tired of the gaslighting and the robots and just like picking the 3 journalists you know we're going to ask you softballs. Now you don't know who's going to be there next. They don't know the fucking questions and they're ready for whatever. This is the country I want to live in.
From Joe Biden, don't forget, this is a war that began because of the previous administration's incompetence and weakness, and President Trump is working very hard to fix it. He has made it clear to both sides that he wants to see a peaceful resolution and a ceasefire as soon as possible. But as for specifics on a timeline, I won't get ahead of the president.
And just on the goals, for this call in particular, is the goal to get Putin to agree to a ceasefire? Is the goal to lead to some sort of in-person negotiations with Putin and the president?
Well, I think, again, we'll see how the call goes. And the president has made it clear his goal is to see a ceasefire and to see this conflict come to an end. And he's grown weary and frustrated with both sides of the conflict. The president and his team have put an enormous amount of effort in solving this very complicated war that, again, began because of the last administration's weakness.
Does he still want to meet Putin personally?
I think the president would certainly be open to that, but let's see how this call goes today.
What's the status of the secondary sanction package? The president's been talking about that. You haven't imposed them yet. Is that still on the table?
I think everything's on the table, yes. And again, I won't get ahead of the president in any commitments or decisions, but certainly it's something he's been looking at and discussing.
Hi, Ken, I'm gonna ask you about the House budget bill. So does the president agree with Republicans behind this bill that Medicaid work requirements should be implemented as soon as 2026?
So the president wants to preserve and protect Medicaid for Americans who this program was intended for, the most vulnerable in our society: pregnant women, low-income families, seniors, those who truly need these benefits. And it should be going to people who physically.
I'm confused.
The First Lady's hard work and dedication.
Dude, what kind of fraud is this? They got her in a blue suit on the thumbnail. Catfish the fuck out of me. I don't like that clickbait. I thought this was a post.
Edge to produce $50 billion worth
Okay.
of such
I believe
imagery from
this
their
is
platforms
actually-
and provide justice for victims.
Hold on. Okay. I believe this is actually from after the phone call was
State of
made.
Arizona and AI supercomputers in the great state.
Let me double check, make sure this isn't just like some kind of rerun. Started streaming May 15th. What is wrong with these people, man? $53 minutes ago, 2 days ago, 51 minutes ago. Okay, it seems like there hasn't been any news about the phone calls with Trump and Zelensky. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Sort of wait it out and kind of get the official news here.
As soon as 2026.
Last week when we were out of town, inflation dropped once again. Oil prices are dropping, gas prices are dropping. The president has added nearly 500,000 jobs to the American economy already. So there's a lot of optimism in this economy, and the president disagrees with that assessment.
And I want to ask you one more thing, if I could. On your Middle East trip, United Arab Emirates is getting some of the most advanced AI chips. So there's agreements there. The UAE is the newest member of BRICS. Is there a concern from the president that those chips and the technology will pass through to China, India, Russia, and Iran?
Part of going to the Middle East was to ensure that the United States, that this part of the region, our Gulf partners, know that the United States of America is there for them again, and that they should be investing in the United States, not in China. And these AI agreements, particularly the one the Secretary of Commerce signed in the UAE, has security guarantees to ensure that China is not getting the advantage, but the United States is getting the advantage when it comes to AI, and that the UAE and the US are working hand in hand together to invest in this space. So read the agreements, there are security guarantees, and this was a great trip for the country, no doubt. Go ahead.
Thanks, Caroline. Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel has said today that Israel will take control of all of Gaza. Is that a goal that President Trump is comfortable with or that he supports?
I'll have to talk to the president about those comments as they just came, I believe, from the prime minister this morning, and I'll let him speak on that. The president has made it very clear he wants to see this conflict in the region end. He wants all hostages to be released. He was pleased that Eden Alexander was returned home safely to his loving family. The president spoke with Eden directly while we were traveling to the Middle East last week. As for the prime minister's comments, I'll let the president himself respond to those. Sure.
Two questions. One, how involved does the president intend to be directly in talking to House members about the bill over the next couple of weeks or the next week?
Sure. Well, over the weekend, the president was in direct conversation and communication with the Speaker of the House. He's been very involved. He always is. He's willing to pick up the phone when he is asked to. So he'll continue to be very engaged in this process with both House members and his friends on the Senate side as well.
And on former President Biden's cancer diagnosis, the president put out a very nice message on Truth Social. Has he talked to President Biden directly? Does he intend to call? What does he intend to say directly?
Not to my knowledge. I don't believe they have spoken, but I'm sure the president would be open to doing that. I spoke to him last night about the former president's cancer diagnosis, and the statement that he put out was the initial reaction he had with me on the phone as well. Peter.
Follow up on former President Biden. White House doctors may have missed the early stages of his prostate cancer. So
Look, I think this is just fucked up. Do not drag. Look, I know that it's kind of like a popular thing to just completely rag on Biden. I really rag on like the Biden administration, but I genuinely feel like he was a complete puppet and was being used, and it's completely sick what happened. And so like the fact that this guy's going through cancer now and that it's kind of like becoming a story, I think this is completely horrendous to try to drag. Prayers up to him, prayers up to his fam, prayers up to his kids who are going through a lot. I hope the best for his family. I hope the best for Trump and his campaign to do the best for this country. And there's no reason to kick an old man while he's down. All right. This is just not even a topic. Anyways, I got paid today. People, the trade played out. I'm getting the fuck off this stream, going to the gym. Great to see all of you guys on this live stream. Click the link in the description, guys. Learn how to trade. Or maybe you guys know how to trade, but you're just not fucking making money. And this is your wake-up call. The longer you wait, the longer you're going to waste money and, time, which is way more valuable than money. So get the show on the road. Come learn this strategy. Shit works. We show it every day. I'll at your boy. Catch you guys later. Happy and safe trading, everybody. Drop a link in the description if you made money. Take it easy. Peace. Or drop a fucking comment in the comment section, damn it. Peace. All right, members, great to see you guys on here.